Now, we've heard from academia and from the industry, both on a slightly optimistic note. And then I wonder what kind of tune will be played by an Indian environmentalist. Chandra Bhushan is President and CEO of the International Forum for Environment, Sustainability and Technology, located in New Delhi, India. He is a passionate communicator for a better environment, but not only that, he wants the transition to be just as well, and points out that this perspective is less talked about when political leaders around the world are carving out their roadmaps and strategies. So what does it take to make India transform its coal-based economy into a renewable one? Let's lend an ear to Chandra Bhushan.
Good afternoon. Let me start by thanking the organizers for inviting me to this very interesting webinar on Energy Transition 2020, Visions of the Future. Now, to have a vision, one must have a basis. And the basis that I have chosen to propound my vision for the future is the IPCC target of 1.5 degree Celsius. Now, we need to keep global warming within 1.5 degrees Celsius to avoid catastrophic impacts. Now, we all know that it is a humongous challenge, but we also know what needs to be done to meet this challenge. If we want to meet 1.5C target, we will have to reduce global emissions by 45% by 2030 and reach net zero emissions by 2050. Renewables will have to meet 85 to 90% of global electricity supply. Practically, we will have to shut down all coal-fired power plants and a large majority of gas-fired power plants as well. Our transportation sector will have to shift to zero carbon technologies. CO2 emissions from industry will have to reduce by anywhere between 75 to 90%. And on top of all these technological changes, we will have to increase forest cover significantly to sequester CO2. Now, this is a big challenge. Doing all these will require all resources and ingenuity to meet these challenges. Now, can this be done? I believe that we can do it. And we can do it by, first of all, putting in place policies, programs, and transforming the market for a rapid transition to renewables and other zero carbon technologies on one hand, and putting policies and plans for a just transition for fossil fuel dependent workers, community, and regions. Now, it is important to understand that in the last 10 to 15 years, most of us have talked about rapid transition. But there has been very little work done on the aspect of just transition. But I believe that if we really want to see the transition to happen, the real transition to happen, then we will have to find answers for both. Rapid transition, which is largely a techno-economic transition, and just transition, which is a much more difficult political economic transition. And these two transitions will have to happen across the world. Every country will have to think about rapid transition and just transition for their fossil fuel dependent communities. Now, I'm going to take the example of India to illustrate whether it is possible for India to do rapid transition towards renewable and just transition away from fossil fuel economy. So the question that I have put in front of me is that, can India decarbonize its energy supply by 2050? Now, to understand that, you have to understand the energy basket of India. India is largely a fossil fuel dependent economy. 3/4 of our energy comes from fossil fuels. Coal alone supplies 45% of our primary energy. Oil is about 23-24%. Natural gas is 5%. And then we have 20% biomass, which is a highly polluting fuel and which is causing air pollution as well as huge health implications on women folk. Now, this is the energy basket of India. So on one hand, we are fossil fuel dependent. On the other hand, we are energy poor. The per capita energy consumption in India is about a third of global average. So going ahead, as India grows its economy to meet the requirements of the economy as well as livelihoods of people, it will have to increase energy consumption as well, because we are at this point of time consuming significantly lower amount of energy than is required to provide decent livelihood to the majority of the population. So we face a dual challenge. On one hand, we will have to uh, reduce fossil fuel use significantly. On the other hand, we will also have to increase our energy consumption. Now, can this dual challenge be met? I believe it is. And there are really positive trends that is emerging in the country. The first trend is falling costs of renewables. Over the last 10 years, the cost of renewable energy has fallen significantly in India. For example, the total cost of utility scale solar PV, the total installed cost of utility scale solar PV has reduced by 88% since 2010. In 2015, the levelized cost of energy for solar and wind was anywhere between 70 to 80% more expensive than coal power. Today, both of them are 10 to 15% cheaper than coal power. In fact, today, the cheapest source of electricity in India is solar and wind. And therefore, India is installing renewable energy at a rapid pace. For example, the installation of grid-connected solar PV has increased at 50% annually since 2015. In 2015, we had only about 3.7 gigawatts of grid-connected solar PV. Today, we have 28.2 gigawatt of grid-connected solar PV. The second trend is super efficiency. In fact, we are today moving towards a world of watts and not kilowatts. And we will have to accelerate this transition. And we have to accelerate this transition even more. We today live in a world of 7-watt LED. Just a few years back, we used to live in a world of 60-watt incandescent bulb. And this transition has happened just in the last 5 years in India. The growth of LED market in India has been nothing less than spectacular. It used to be about $75 million market in 2010. It reached $1.75 billion in 2016. Today, estimates are that it is already about $2.5 billion market. In fact, LED bulb today dominates the lighting market in India. And this transition towards super efficiency is happening in a number of sectors, from fans to air conditioner to refrigerators to televisions. In most of the household appliances, we see significant improvement in energy efficiency. And as I said, we will have to accelerate this trend further. The third trend is the battery world, the trend in which battery and other storage technology is going to dominate the way we produce, store, and consume electricity. Now, this is happening on the back of a global innovation. It is not only happening in India. In fact, India and other countries are benefiting out of global innovation that is happening in the battery technology. Now, we have already achieved significant improvements in the battery technology. In fact, I show this slide to people who are skeptical about the battery world, and this is what has happened in the last 40 years. 40 years back, for 1 hour of talk time, we had to charge our mobile phone for 20 hours. Today, for 1 hour of talk time, we have to charge our mobile phones for 3 minutes. And therefore, on the matrix of charge time and talk time, the battery technology has improved by close to 500 times. And please remember, 40 years back, that mobile phone was not affordable for the most. Today, this mobile phone is for the masses. So we have seen significant improvement in battery technology over the last 4 decades. Going ahead, we need another 10 to 15 times improvement in battery technology. And that is already happening. On the cost matrix, the cost of lithium ion batteries, for instance, has reduced by 80% since 2010. And today, batteries are not only being used for automobile sector and for mobile telephony and other appliances, they're also being used for grid scale storage. And India is putting in place number of pilots, megawatt scale pilots on grid scale battery storage in different parts of the country. So we have started to move towards a battery world where renewable plus battery will be able to provide 24/7 electricity to all of us. The last trend is smart grid, which is actually a co-benefit agenda for a country like India, where transmission and distribution losses are very, very high. And smart grid will not only reduce T&D losses for us, it will also improve quality of electricity, will improve efficiency of use, as well as reduce cost. And therefore, we are putting in place policies, for example, on net metering. Open access is allowed in the country. Smart meters are being installed. As I said, we have pilot projects on battery storage. Time of the day payment is happening. There is flexible demand and supply system put in place, and we are using more and more artificial intelligence and other technologies to make our grid smart. Now, a lot more needs to be done, a lot more investment is required, but this trend is already visible. Now, once you put in place all these 4 trends, falling costs of renewable, innovation in battery technology, smart grid, and super efficiency, the first outcome that comes is that electricity is now potentially the biggest contender to become the prime mover. And therefore, inexpensive renewable electricity with storage can practically replace fossil fuel in almost all uses in next few years, if not decades. There would be exceptions. In industries like cement and steel and fertilizer, it is not going to be possible. We will have to move towards an hydrogen economy. And similarly, in transport sector, especially heavy duty transport sector, we will have to think about hydrogen and other technologies to reach zero emission performance. So, but for the large part of our economy, we can use renewable electricity and storage to move further. Now, the second outcome is this movement to electricity as the prime mover will be affordable for the poor. There is a concern that transition to a renewable world is going to be expensive, but the evidence is absolutely opposite to that. In fact, in India, today the cheapest source of cooking fuel is electricity. In fact, induction cooking is half the cost of LPG. You can see on the left side of this slide picture of a gentleman who is running a tea stall in rural part of India, and he is using induction stove to make tea, simply because it is the cheapest source of energy for him. And we see this trend in the paratransit sector as well. Today, the cheapest source of paratransit for the poor in India is electric rickshaw. And therefore, today, India has more electric rickshaw than electric cars in China. And this sector is growing. So the transition to a renewable zero carbon world will be affordable. It need not be expensive. In fact, I'm saying it will be affordable for the poor. Now, based on this, we can build a new energy architecture which will be based on electricity. It will be an architecture which will be an Uber model in which prosumers and aggregators would replace large utilities. We will have decentralized distributed network, and grid would become a medium of exchange. In fact, electricity grid of the future will be similar to information highway, and the new energy architecture will be similar to internet. Now, all these technologies exist. They are today, some of them are expensive, but they are going to become cheaper very soon. And therefore, rapid transition is possible. Rapid transition is also affordable. Rapid transition is also good for the poor. Now, the problem is the just transition. As I said, while rapid transition is a techno-economic challenge, just transition is a political economic challenge. Now, this is the coal map of India. Today, coal mining is an important source of growth and livelihood in about 25 to 30 districts of India. The total population of these districts would be about anywhere between 50 to 60 million. Now, these are coal-centric economies. Most of them are also informal economies. Majority of employment in these areas are in informal sector, informal coal sector. And therefore, there's a strong political support for coal. Now, how do you close and transition these areas away from coal mining is a major challenge for a country like India, and similar challenges will be witnessed in other parts of the world as well. Now, therefore, the issue in front of us is how do we close existing fossil fuel industry, coal and gas-based plants, coal mines, oil wells, how do we close them? What do we replace them with? How do we build an alternate resilient economy in these areas? And most importantly, who pays for it and how? And therefore, as I said, just transition is going to be a major political and economic transition. I have a vision, which is that in this transition towards zero carbon world, people who are dependent on fossil fuels should not suffer, but I don't have answers. In fact, very few people have answers on how do we do just transition. Let me end by saying that we will have to embrace a vision in which both rapid transition and just transition will have to take place. Simply rapid transition to renewable technology is not going to be sufficient. In fact, I very strongly believe that a zero carbon world will not happen because we have technology or because it is affordable. It will only happen if we have political support for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chandra, for that very interesting and thought-provoking presentation, and very precise as well, if I might add. And good afternoon to you in Delhi. First of all, I really enjoyed your example with the mobile phone batteries, how they've changed through the last 4 decades, which is a very good symbol in a way of the very quick and rapid transition that we're seeing and the development within technology. But you were saying that India is in many ways already rigged for managing both a rapid and a just transition. But the politics aren't there yet. You said this requires political leadership. So how do you get there? What does it take to make these political choices to be made? Why isn't that happening? Oh, I lost my pen in all of this. Go ahead, Chandra.
I think it is important to understand that political choices are both what will happen nationally and what will happen internationally. Because we are talking about a zero carbon world in the context of global warming. The term is global. And therefore, every country is looking at each other in terms of who's going to do what. So I think the answer for political leadership will not only be national, it will also be international. Unfortunately, I do see in many countries national leadership emerging, if not to the extent that we want, but international leadership, international collaboration on climate change has just gone out of the gate. I mean to say, with what is happening at the UNFCCC and Donald Trump moving out of the Paris Agreement, in any case, Paris Agreement was not going to be sufficient. We wanted If you want to meet 1.5 or 2 degrees, you need much better agreement than Paris Agreement. So I think the answer is not only national. We need also a global leadership on this issue.
Definitely. And you said towards the end of your presentation that I don't have answers because you were asking a lot of questions, but the audience is also asking questions for you. And there's one that I think you might have some perspectives on it. So how do you see the potential for biogas in India? Using waste, sewage and manure as methane capture and use could be relatively cheaper, local, just solutions. What do you think about that?
Well, there is already a lot of work happening on biomass-based energy, and biogas is one of them. There is obviously a lot more potential on biomass. If you look at the energy basket of India, 20% of primary energy comes from biomass, and most of them are burnt. Now, we have modern technology to convert that 20% biomass, which is a renewable source, into a much cleaner fuel, that is biogas. And obviously, there's a huge potential that biogas can provide cooking energy in rural India. But if we can do it on a scale, it can also supply energy to industries. So yes, there's obviously a lot of potential there.
Mm. And another question, you mentioned it briefly on one of your final slides, I think it was, and this goes into depth into how to go beyond replacing existing fossil fuel based with renewable energy sources based appliances, going from that simple transition towards creating an active role for local prosumers, both citizens and professional ones. And you were talking about the coal-based and informal economy. Maybe that is something one could look into, but how do you actually do that?
So when I say informal economy and coal, it is important to understand that developing countries, what differentiates developed countries and developing countries, or you can say industrialized economies and emerging economies, is the formal nature of the economy. In our part of the world, the formal economy, quote unquote, is a smaller part of the total economy. And so when someone says that it's a coal economy, it could mean that 70% of all the employment is in informal sector, which could be, individual gathering coal and refining coal and selling it to cities in small quantities. So for a Western audience, it is an alien concept. Okay, something that you would have done in 19th century. But that do exist now. You have individual coal miners who mine coal, and sell it to the market, and that could be 70 to 80% of the economy. How do you move them, who are really poor people? How do you move them? Tell them I'm going to close down coal mines, but what is the alternative that you're going to give it to them? It's very easy to say give them solar power, but what the hell they're going to do with solar power? Okay, so I don't think we have actually understood what it means to replace a fossil fuel community to a non-fossil fuel one, and what alternatives exist. How do we do that transition? It requires a lot more work.
Yeah. Well, Chandra, I think we're going to stop there at the moment. Of course, you are returning for the panel discussion as well, so we're really looking forward to seeing you again there. So once again, thank you for your very nice presentation, and see you in 12, 13, 15 minutes. So you can just turn off your camera now, and we'll let you join in later on. Thank you very much.